Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλησπέρα σας. Καλώς ήρθατε στη δεύτερη εκπομπή με θέμα Ελλάδα, εθνική και διεθνής ασφάλεια τον 21ο αιώνα. Στη σημερινή εκπομπή θα κοιτάξουμε τα γεγονότα στη Λιβύη, το ρόλο της Τουρκίας, αλλά και την ενδεχόμενη απουσία της Αμερικής στην ευρύτερη περιοχή. Τις τελευταίες εβδομάδες στη Λιβύη βλέπουμε την κυβέρνηση της Τρίπολης να κερδίσει σημαντικά έδαφος απέναντι στο Χαφτάρ. Η Τουρκία, η οποία έχει στηρίξει πλήρως την κυβέρνηση της Τρίπολης, θριαμβολογεί για αυτές τις επιτυχίες της και παράλληλα κλιμακώνει την ένταση σε όλα τα ελληνοτουρκικά θέματα. Στην άλλη πλευρά του Ατλαντικού, και ενώ ο Τραμπ ετοιμάζεται για τις εκλογές τον Νοέμβριο, έχει ανοιχτά πάρα πολλά θέματα, τον κορονοϊό, την οικονομική κρίση που έχει δημιουργηθεί από την πανδημία, τις διαδηλώσεις που έχουν ξεσπάσει με το θάνατο του George Floyd και μια διαμάχη που έχει με τον Υπουργό Άμυνας, τον Μαρκ Έσπερ, ο οποίος διαφοροποιήθηκε από τον Τραμπ όσο αφορά τη χρήση στρατιωτικής δύναμης στις διαδηλώσεις. Και σε συνέχεια όλων αυτών υπάρχει μια συζήτηση κατά πόσο η Αμερική ενδεχομένως έχει σκοπό να μην εμπλακεί ιδιαίτερα στην περιοχή της Μεσογείου. Όλα αυτά τα θέματα θα τα συζητήσουμε σήμερα με τον Αμερικανό αναλυτή Ίαν Λέσερ, ο οποίος είναι αντιπρόεδρος του German Marshall Fund και διευθυντής του γραφείου στη Βρυξέλλες και έχει εξαιρετική εξειδίκευση στα θέματα της Τουρκίας και στην ευρύτερη Μεσόγειο. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Lesser. It's a pleasure and an honor. And I did already my introduction in Greek. And I would like us to start our conversation, if possible, with Libya. What is going on there? We had recent developments. What is actually going there? Who is actually fighting whom? Where this thing is heading? Is like the West divided or united? And what is the role of key countries like Egypt, Russia, the United Arab Emirates, and so on and so forth?
Well, thank you. And first of all, it's a great pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the invitation. Well, the situation has gotten a lot more complex in Libya, but the dynamics have changed in ways that I think have surprised many people. There was something of a standoff for an extended period of time in which the rebel, if you want to say, General Haftar was in the ascendancy, and many people expected him at some point to be victorious in Tripoli and to basically take over the key installations, the capital. He already controlled large parts of the country and so on, oil installations. There was not much hope for the government of national accord in Libya. And this situation has changed quite dramatically in the last weeks, and it's not least because of Turkey's intervention, a very successful intervention, which in fact I think surprised a lot of people, both operationally and politically. Maybe start with the political side of it. It's surprising because in this way, Turkey and Russia find themselves on opposite sides. Russia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt have been supporting the general in his quest to take away control from the government of national accord, who they view as too supportive, too close to Islamist factors in the country. Turkey, for a variety of reasons, which we can talk about, decided to intervene directly in this case. First by sending equipment, by sending Syrian mercenaries there. The other sides have been doing that as well, by the way. And then finally to send much more sophisticated drones and other equipment, which frankly made a big operational difference on the ground to the point where it's not at all clear that General Haftar can even maintain his position in the country. So in that sense, operationally, it's been very successful. Surprising politically because one assumed that Russia and Turkey were more or less on the same page with their S-400 deal and other things. Not so clear. Clearly, they're not on the same page in Libya, and they're not really on the same page in Syria, but that's a different question.
So what do you see from now on? I mean, apparently the situation right now is totally in favor of the Tripoli-based government, and there are discussions between, let's say, there are discussions from Russia and Turkey. What will happen? I mean, will they divide the country? Will they? I mean, where do you see this going?
Well, I cannot imagine that Ankara really wants to have a long-term presence to control parts of Libya. This is not, I don't think their aim in any sense. I think they would like to see, for political reasons, they have reasons to support the Tripoli government. But as a matter of long-term presence, I think they would find that very costly for all sorts of reasons. I mean, that said, clearly they are interested in having the Libyan government on their side when it comes to maritime demarcation in the Eastern Mediterranean and other things. And for whatever reasons, perhaps somewhat cynically, the Libyan government agreed recently to a demarcation agreement with Turkey. Turkey doesn't have a lot of friends in the region these days on maritime issues, on politics, on security, and the government in Tripoli, therefore, is an important one for them as they look to resolve, from their point of view, some of these maritime questions.
So we see Turkey being a bit more aggressive in the Eastern Mediterranean. Before moving to Turkey, just one thing on Libya. How does the EU deal with that? Because, for example, the UN backs the Tripoli-based government. Then we had France supporting the other side. So is the EU divided? How they can handle that situation right now?
It's a very difficult question. It's one of the most prominent sort of pressing foreign policy questions for the European Union, because obviously European interests are directly engaged there. For some countries more than others, obviously for Greece and for Italy, but also for France. It's become a key test case, and of course there are substantial differences on approach between the European members on this question. France has been, some think rather strangely, engaged in a way that has been supportive of the rebels, let's say, in Syria, less supportive of the Libya, less supportive of the Libyan government. Nobody really wants to be on the side of Russia on this these days. France has taken a very different view of the Turkish intervention, as has the rest of Europe. And of course, Europe formally has a policy of preventing arms transfers, arms sales into Libya, which is the result of a UN decision, a UN resolution. And in fact, there is an operation underway at the moment to monitor this at sea. But of course, it's not been very successful. Russians, Turks, others, UAE have more or less disregarded this, either by shipping things in or by sea still, or flying equipment in by air. So it does, in a sense, make the European Union look powerless at a time when all the talk is of a more geopolitical Europe. If you're going to have a more geopolitical Europe, this is obviously one of the key tests. And so far, Europe is not being that active or that successful.
So to move to Turkey, as we've said, Turkey has supported a lot the Tripolis-based government, and now is a bit triumphant about the success that is going on. Also, Turkey has claimed regarding the islands that the islands have no sea rights, no continental shelf, no exclusive economic zone other than territorial rights. That creates, of course, raises tensions with Greece and Cyprus. Then we have the Turkish-Libya agreement, military agreement that they have and support, which aggravates things even worse. So what is actually Turkey's goal? We mentioned a bit about it before. And is there a confrontation, the possibility of a confrontation between Greece and Turkey regarding the exploration rights in the Eastern Mediterranean? I mean, and is there a way to avoid this, to de-escalate tension? I've placed
it's a complicated situation. I think on all the points you mentioned, the Turkish position has not, frankly, changed very much over the years, but they're choosing to be much more assertive about it these days. And one has to ask the question, why? I mean, part of this, most observers believe, part of it is simply President Erdogan's interest and skill at using nationalist issues for political advantage inside Turkey. But of course, he's not creating these out of whole cloth. I mean, there's a broad consensus around these sovereignty questions inside Turkey. And there's also an awareness of the risks. I mean, I don't think that Turkey seeks to push this beyond a certain limit. which is to say they want to make a much stronger sort of political and legal, even strategic case about energy exploration and maritime demarcation and things like that. But they also see the risks, as does Turkey, as does Greece, obviously, of pushing this too far, the risks of brinkmanship. Because in that situation, Turkey is not going to have a lot of friends. There will be a lot of risks for Turkey as well. This is at a time when Turkish relations with traditional partners like the United States and even within NATO are deeply strained. So there's not a lot of advantage in pushing this beyond a certain point for Turkey. That said, with all of these forces operating in proximity, with all of the public opinion engagement around these sovereignty questions on all sides, actually, the risks increase. And the last time we had this kind of a explosive situation was in the days, you remember them, of Emir Kardak. If you go back to the early to mid 90s, until that incident and the realization that two countries had stepped back from the brink, it was a very dangerous situation and required daily management. It was a huge burden for Greece, for Turkey, and for their partners in the West. We haven't had to live with that for the last decades. There has been this corps d'etat between Athens and Ankara, which has stabilized the situation, and a lot of shared interests, even if they don't want to admit it directly. And so there is a risk that that is fraying, and therefore always a risk that things can go wrong. And if things go wrong against this very troubled political background, then one could find oneself in a situation that escalates and is very hard to control.
I was reading in one of your recent papers about the brinkmanship that you mentioned, and how the Erdogan himself, the way he uses issues like, for example, now the Aegean, the Mediterranean, for internal nationalistic momentum, and that could move to another area, for example, finance later on. So there is a delicate balance. And also, I would like to mention that, as Borrell said recently also regarding the rights of Greece and Cyprus, that they're right, but that we should be careful on how we're handling Turkey, not to have them opposite us, but to try actually to make them understand why it's in their own interest to have them near us, so they avoid, let's say, a vis-a-vis policy of taking it to the extreme. So it seems that policy-wise there is a net to help us avoid further tensions, if I understand this right. I don't know, you're taking it.
I would agree with that. I mean, and there are indeed common interests. I mean, at this very dangerous time, in fact, both countries have a very strong interest in seeing a bit of a tourism season. It's an obvious interest, and it's shared. So that plus the long-term interest in energy development in the region, I mean, this is sometimes put in a very competitive way. But in fact, to monetize those resources, especially at a time of declining energy prices, to monetize those resources effectively, international collaboration, regional collaboration can be a key. I mean, Turkey has a very elaborate pipeline network already established that can feed into the European market. If you can imagine how others in the region with a stake in developing these resources, whether it's Greece or Cyprus or Egypt or others, could make use of that without having to build new expensive infrastructure, that would be great. But of course, that's not the situation we have at the moment. It's viewed as a zero-sum game. And therefore, there is an inclination to sort of push these things along. And of course, nationalism and this kind of discourse, is the flavor of the month everywhere. In Turkey, is maybe a key example, but it's true in many places.
In the discussion, there is a country we haven't mentioned, the key country. We haven't talked about the US, which is surprising in a way, because the US traditionally has a key role in the Mediterranean. You have a major naval force. And now we kind of see maybe disengaging from the area. We see Trump in turmoil with his cabinet, some members of his cabinet, with the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. and a bit absent even from our discussion. And what would this mean for the area and the stability and the peace of the area? And let me make a note here that back in 1974, with the Watergate crisis, when the US didn't intervene in the area, we had a Greek-Turkish war in Cyprus and Turkey invading the island. I mean, is there a fear of something similar today? Should we worry about a similar circumstance? So.
Well, I completely agree that, first of all, that the U.S. is a big factor, can be a big factor in this, has played a role over time, both positively and negatively if it's misperceived. To go back to the 1996 situation, again, it was obvious that the United States, in particular one or two political personalities, played a very key role in diffusing that situation, which risked getting seriously out of control between Greece and Turkey. And Richard Holbrooke at the time played a key role in diplomacy. This administration, the Trump administration, has sent out all sorts of mixed signals, clearly very mixed signals about even the attention to European security, Middle Eastern security, the Eastern Mediterranean. In truth, the United States hasn't gone anywhere. We're still fully engaged. But the debate about whether we might has become much hotter, largely because of things that the president has said. So it's lent a degree of unpredictability to American policy. Clearly, the relationship with Turkey has gone from bad to worse in recent years. It's never been easy to manage, as I said, but it's really gotten much worse. So, you know, just as the relationship with Turkey has deteriorated in recent years, the relationship with Greece has quietly gotten much, much closer. And so the equation is very different. There has never been a lack of attention to this situation in Congress or from the U.S. foreign policy community, but the administration sends all sorts of mixed signals. And of course, now we're looking to an American election in November. The Biden administration presumably would be much more explicitly engaged and would bring in people with a whole history of experience on these issues, which would be a very different thing. I think it would be positive, but I can also understand that from a Turkish perspective, they're looking at a window where perhaps a more assertive posture won't be so easy after, well, next year. So, yeah, I think it's important that the United States send some clear messages about stability, about commitment, that we're watching, that we can help, and to do this with Europe, which has not been the case on many things recently. I think that's very, very important, because Europe matters for Greece, for Turkey, but ultimately also for the United States in this situation. It's Europe's backyard.
Yeah, Borrell was talking about the key importance of the transatlantic partnership between the EU and the US, but in actual terms, we don't see an engagement of the US in the area right now, at least. Something very, very direct, let's say, involvement.
You know, it's true that there's and this is again part of what the administration has been signaling. There's a kind of tentative quality to our engagement in Europe and even the Middle East these days, which sort of comes together in the Eastern Mediterranean. But you know, in practical terms, we're still there, fully there, diplomatically, militarily. We haven't gone anywhere. I think a lot of this debate about American disengagement is really overblown. I mean, the American military presence in Europe is bigger than it was at the start of this administration, and that's a process that started under Obama, actually. And you know, other than Iraq, you really don't see this sort of or Afghanistan, if you want to go further, you don't really see this American disengagement in practical terms from that part of the world. So, you know, I think we need to be a little careful about that. But you're right to ask the question about whether the United States would have the energy and the credibility to intervene diplomatically if things did start to get out of control.
Thank you. I will cut it here because I just saw the time that we're a bit in excess. Is there anything else you would like to add? I mean, regarding the...
No, just to say it's a great pleasure to be with you and look forward to another opportunity.
It was great having you. I really look forward to discussing with you in the future, let's say the fall. We can have another discussion. Ίαν Λέσερ with us. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.